Hey, my friends. So good to see everybody. I hope things are good in your world. I had the opportunity to talk to a buddy of mine. Our paths cross once every, 5 years. It's Brian Dalton, Mr. Deity himself. I don't know if I should call you Mr. Deity anymore because are you not doing a lot of those videos these days, or what's the story on that?
Yeah, if I can do one as though it's a press conference, which is the last one that I did, I'm good. Or, I'm probably going to go find other people just to do an episode here and there with. But all of the cast is busy or gone, or they're all out on their own now.
Yeah,
so
the little kids have left the nest.
They have.
You're back.
They've all grown and gone away.
Tell me about, first of all, I've got to play my cards up front. Brian was kind enough to write the foreword to Sacred Cows, and he's a guy who's, I've always been amazed by the level of the quality of what you do. When I got into this game 10 years ago, there was a real quality discrepancy, and that has largely been solved, somewhat
Right.
by technology and somewhat by education. People have gotten better at shooting their stuff.
Right.
But, you came along at a time when, man, we really needed to raise the quality bar, and your stuff looked amazing. This is no accident. You do this professionally.
Yeah, well, I made a movie in 2002, and that went pretty well. But we were encouraged to remake it, and we started Deity because we just couldn't get any money to remake the film, and we wanted to maybe make a little bit of a name for ourselves, so maybe someone would finally give us money. And we started doing these Deity shows, and it just took off. But I had Jimbo and I were, the guy who plays Larry, we're both doing video production, and we had great equipment, and we knew how to use it, and lights and cameras and, all kinds of great stuff. So it just ended up being, something that we kind of fell into, luckily.
Now, everything's still in the archive. Even though you may have moved on to some other projects. Describe who Mr. Deity is. What's the focus?
When I about halfway into the first season, I had to really kind of do kind of a, who is this guy? And basically, he's an indie film producer. He's a guy who can't get enough funding to do the project that he wants to do, so he has to cut corners in every way, and has therefore made this crap universe with bad good to evil ratios. No other sentient being in the multiverse would be allowed to do this, but he went rogue and did it on his own. And we have a whole season that's just backstory, which actually killed me because no one ever had to watch the episodes sequentially. And that's the only season where you can't just watch one, and you have to watch them in a row. It's a whole backstory of the Mr. Deity character. It was my prequel, if you will. And no one wanted to do that. So I can't begin to tell you how many people I lost during that season. Not a great idea.
So it was like a sequential thing? Like if I missed episode 3 and 4 and picked up 5 and 6, I'm lost. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, they kind of all related to each other, and you had to go sequentially through, and I think it was 22 episodes. So it really required some effort on people's part, and no one wanted to do that.
You're God. Like Mr. Deity is God.
He's God with a small g. He's not the God. He's a God.
All right. So are you responsible for creation, your version of God, or what?
Yeah. Yes, I'm responsible for creation, but I didn't create everything. Energy and matter already existed. Mr. Deity came out of the void because he was bored to death. He decided to turn off his all-knowingness because it ruined things like birthday parties and the endings of M. Night Shyamalan movies. Even the good one, as we say in one of the episodes.
You know what's coming. It just sort of takes all the juice right out of living, doesn't it? It just no surprises.
Yeah, and we actually did an episode where he turns his all-knowingness back on because I wanted people to understand how obnoxious it would be to have to communicate with an all-knowing person who knows exactly what you're going to say every time you start to open your mouth.
Okay, I know what you're doing. You're trying to think of absolutely nothing, but it's not going to work because I can simply jump forward in time to the next thing that you're going to say. I know. How does anyone expect to have a personal relationship with this? And this isn't even the worst part.
Elle?
I'm right here. And before you ask, right here is everywhere. But I'm immaterial. I know. Who would want to be around this for more than 5 minutes? It's awful. You've been such a trooper. I really appreciate it.
So then...
Oh, I know exactly what I'm going to do, and I know exactly when I'm going to do it. In fact, I feel as though I have no choice in the matter whatsoever. Do you know how impotent that makes me feel? No, not that kind of impotent. But I am an all-powerful being, and yet I feel not 1 ounce of free will. I feel as though all of my decisions have already been made for me because I always know exactly what I'm going to do way before I do it. And it's even worse once I'm outside time. Because when I'm outside time, I have no ability to act whatsoever. No time, no action. It's like I'm a photograph rather than a movie. I'm completely inert.
I always think of that when I think, really, you're going to hang out with an all-knowing being who exists outside of time? How does that work? How exactly does that work?
I never thought of it in that context before. Like, it would be the most... I mean, everything's predicted well in advance. It would just be horrible. Yeah. Well, it'd be horrible anyway. Your God is kind of a... And I want to bounce into the new stuff that you're working on because you've got some beautiful things on the plate. But your God is like this... confused isn't the word. You're bemused, perhaps. You just kind of look around like the consequences of your actions sometimes are late news to you. Like, holy shit, when I created this, I didn't realize it was going to be a problem. I mean, am I reading the character right or what?
Well, he's obtuse. He's completely obtuse. But, you know, here's what I want to tell people. I'm not straying from the source material here. I mean, that's who he is. If you read the book, he doesn't know the most basic things, like, you know, the moon is not another source of light, or that, you know, young girls can break their hymen before they have intercourse. He's just an idiot based on the text. You don't have to stretch it. He's just a complete immoral idiot.
So I told him the promised land was that crappy little area right off the Mediterranean. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Tiny place with no oil?
No oil.
Sir, you have to stop your people. You gotta send down an angel, do something.
Stop what? What are they doing?
They're gonna stone an innocent girl to death.
You're kidding. That's outrageous. What did she do?
Well, they're saying she's not a virgin.
Oh, well.
Oh.
Well?
It's just, you know, if she's not a virgin...
Is she or isn't she?
Does it matter? They're gonna stone her to death. They're going to kill her. And she could have just been, you know, riding horseback or something.
Well, she should have gone side saddle.
Did they catch her fornicating?
No.
Well, so then how do they know she's not a virgin?
Yeah.
She was married yesterday, and her husband takes her up to the room, and, you know, there was no...
No evidence of virtue.
Yeah, if you want to call it that.
Well, I don't know what you want me to do about it.
I want you to stop it.
That's their culture.
Their culture?
That's how they roll.
That's how they roll. This father probably put down a pretty penny for the dowry, and I'll bet the groom was expecting some USDA prime, not something that's already been chewed on. I'll bet he's ticked.
Yeah, and this girl made her father look like a total schmuck.
Total schmuck.
His reputation will never be the same
Never.
if he does nothing. He'll have no honor.
Larry, this guy thought he was driving off the lot in a brand new Caddy, and then he gets her home, pops the hood, and sees nothing but wear and tear. And there's no oil in the damn thing.
Dry motor.
I mean, if that doesn't deserve some kind of punishment, I don't know what does.
So do all the men have to be virgins too?
Why?
No, I don't know whether that would be necessary.
Well, how do you work the math on that one? It takes two to tango.
Hey, look, I'm the first to admit I'm not good at math.
And he doesn't like to tango. He's
No,
more of a
disco.
chicka bow.
That's who the God of the Bible is. So that's who I play him as. I play him as the real thing. It's not a stretch in any way.
It goes down a little easier, though, because of the sort of humorous tone. There's something about the temperature of Mr. Deity that doesn't come off like you are, you know, you're not writing about the God of the Bible is, you know, and then that Dawkins quote at the end of it, the monster. I don't know, you lace it with sugar, so to speak.
Well, he is lovable still. You know, I play him so that you don't hate him. You look at, and you know, anyone in our real lives who I mean, Borat is the perfect example, right? Borat comes here and he talks to people, and people just give him the benefit of the doubt because they know, well, he's from another country. He doesn't understand our ways. His culture is different, and they'll just let him get away with all kinds of stuff because he's basically lovable. He's not he's not trying to be a dick, though he is. But they give, everybody gives him the benefit of the doubt. That's basically the Mr. Deity character is, he's a jerk and he's insensitive, but he's got all this power, so you don't want to piss him off. And, you just want to keep him doing as little damage as he possibly can. And that's what Lucy and Larry try to do. Jesus is just kind of, I always thought of the show as, Larry is the heart of the show. Lucy is the brains. And Jesus is the body because he's gorgeous, and Mr. Deity is just kind of there for to make things happen, but he is an idiot. But again, not really any different from the source material.
Yeah. I love the fact that you do link directly to the verses of the Old and New Testament. It's awesome. So, that's what I know you from. That's what a lot of people have been introduced to you through. That's why I wanted to go back and talk about Mr. Deity, even though you're focused on other things. But then after that, it's probably the angriest I've ever seen you. I caught a video that you had done right after Charlie Hebdo in regard to the Pope.
Yeah.
You want to, maybe you can set it up better than I can. All I know is that you were pissed because the Pope had been deferential when it came to free speech and, we should expect a response kind of thing. And you just, I've never seen that level of pissed offedness. So you tell me about it.
I woke up that morning, I read his comments, and if I could have just beaten the shit out of him, I would have.
Explain the comments in your own words.
Well, the comments were basically, if someone says something bad about my mother, I'm going to physically assault them, and you have the right to do that. And, people need to watch what they say. And to which I said, fuck you, asshole.
As though the Catholic Church hadn't already done everything it possibly could to absolutely obliterate the moral credibility it never had. This morning, I woke up to the Pope, the Vicar of Christ, the head of the Holy Roman Catholic Church, advocating actual physical violence in response to offensive or provocative speech, thereby inciting violence and coddling the terrorist who killed my fellow satirist last week at the French weekly Charlie Hebdo. If my good friend Dr. Gaspari says a curse word against my mother, he can expect a punch. It's normal. You cannot provoke. You cannot insult the faith of others. You cannot make fun of the faith of others. There are so many people who speak badly about religions or other religions, who make fun of them, who make a game out of the religions of others. They are provocateurs, and what happens to them is what would happen to Dr. Gaspari if he says a curse against my mother. There is a limit. Well, I have 3 words for you, Pope Frankie. Fuck you, asshole. I not only can make fun of the faith of others, I do it professionally. You sick, totalitarian bastard, you terrorist apologist. Your claim to be connected to some higher power gets you no pass from criticism, ridicule, and mockery, you self-important jerkwad. And by the way, does the fact that I'm so deeply offended by what you've said now give me the right to physically harm Catholics, destroy Catholic property, or say something like, well, if the Pope gets assassinated, well, the Pope brought it on himself. You simple-minded, mouth-breathing provocateur.
Yeah, I thought it was outrageous. I've never been so upset by anything. I literally wrote that piece in 20 minutes and then shot it. I mean, I was livid, and I wanted to get it up ASAP, and I don't think I've ever been as upset. I got almost as close when one of the Mormon leaders told people that they should not love people that they should not love. Or I can't remember the phrasing. It was awful too. But these people are just, there's nothing worse than people thinking that they know the mind of God. There really is nothing worse on the planet.
And you're an authority. I mean, you can address these challenges. It's true.
Yes.
Let's talk about, not just Charlie Hebdo, but blasphemy, right? Blasphemy is a victimless crime.
Right.
Ridicule is a great way to lampoon the powerful, to draw a circle around many of the problems. I'm not a fan of ridicule one-on-one, but in the larger picture, it has great utility. And yet we're in this weird culture. I don't know how you could be a comedian in today's speech climate, because everything you say is the potential call out or cancellation or lawsuit or you're fired. I don't know. Do I call you a humorist or comedian? You operate in those waters. What are your thoughts?
I think of myself as a satirist first, more than any other thing. And yeah, it is. You know, you gotta stay on the straight and narrow. Now, it's a weird thing because comedy did not used to be like that. You could just say anything and people would just write it off to, well, he's just making a joke. Well, now everything's potentially not a joke. It's a harmful, hurtful thing. And to a certain extent, I understand it, but I do think we've gone over the edge. You know, moderation in all things. You know, some of these people are just too freaked out by everything. And I've gotten my fill of, you know, people shitting on me for stuff that I do and say.
I think there's probably an absence of good faith, meaning that they automatically assume ill intent. You know, and I think intent matters, doesn't it? What do you mean? Yeah. What you're trying to accomplish is important, right? Right.
Yeah. It's not everything. Obviously, intent is not everything, but in terms of understanding something, it is everything. You know, I mean, a person's intent in any situation really does help you understand where they're coming from. So, and sometimes people just say things that are, you know, and it's very difficult also because in this culture, I mean, we are hyper rapidly changing. I mean, what was acceptable to say yesterday literally may not be acceptable to say the next day. You know, so there's a lot of stuff. I feel really bad for, you know, I'm getting up there now. I'm 54, but I do feel bad for older people who just cannot keep up with what's out of bounds now and what's not. You know, and they're just. You know, they're not gonna make it. That's why I'm worried about Joe Biden right now. I mean, I just I can't imagine him keeping up with everything. He's already put his foot in his mouth. I don't know how many times since he announced. So that's just going to keep happening. And
talking here with Brian Dalton. You're 54. I mean,
54.
You got a good taxidermist or something because you look really good over there. I'm just saying.
I have the world's oiliest skin. It was an absolute nightmare when I was younger because I had cystic acne and had to deal with all that crap. But in terms of aging, you know, I don't have hardly any wrinkles. And, you know, the worst you can say about me is my hair is
God is
all
timeless.
gray.
God has no beginning and no end.
Yeah. I used to actually have to spray white into it when we started. And then, you know, I married Lucifer. And that changed all that. Yeah. The hair went white in just a couple of years.
So you segue out of Mr. Deity, and then it was Way of the Mister next in your line of projects? I
started doing Way of the Mister because we had done the second season of Mr. Deity with Sony, and there was a long period where they were trying to figure out whether we were going to do a second season with them or not. And they wanted to do something much bigger, and they turned out not being able to do it. But we were kind of on hiatus for almost 18 months. So I started doing this show called Words, which was short-lived, and The Way of the Mister, which was kind of what I wanted to do it as opposed to Kirk Cameron and Ray Comfort, Way of the Master. I thought this would be a funny take. And it's the Mr. Deity ethos of anti-theism and atheism and free thought and skepticism, but, you know, in a different format. And that format can take all kinds of different shapes and forms. The first one we did was a 60 minutes like piece about reparative therapy, but I've done a lot of just straight talking to the camera. I do these things every now and then called Mr. Peace Theater, where they're little vignettes of things that kind of make a point that I think of here and there. And and that's how that happened.
So you play it straight on Way of the Mister, or?
Well, it's still comedy oriented. It's always funny. I mean, I think I write funny, but I pop in these little pop-ups that are almost like, I think of them as a literate version of Mystery Science Theater. You know, it's kind of comments that you would hear from the gang, you know, sitting in the chairs watching the movie or the video, but they're just little words or sentences that pop up People hate me because I don't keep them up long enough, and it's a little bit strategy because I want them to just watch the video again. And everybody tells you, "Damn you! I have to watch the video twice because those pop-ups go by too quick." So once I watch listening to you, and once I just read the pop-ups. But I have lengthened them because I've gotten so many complaints. But the pop-ups, I had to re-upload something last night because it didn't have my begging segment in it, and I forgot about it. And I went back after 3 weeks, and I was just looking it over to make sure everything was okay. And I had forgotten all the pop-ups, and I was laughing my ass off. And that's the best thing in the world to me, when I can go back and watch my own stuff, and it cracks me up. I'm like, okay, that was pretty cool. Because by the time you're doing it, you probably know this. By the time you're actually finished, cutting a piece together and putting all this stuff in there, it just seems like the stupidest piece of crap ever, because you've seen it a zillion times. I had so much anxiety the first season of Mr. Deity, because every time we would shoot, I would write it, I would think this is funny. When we were doing it, I would think it's funny. But after hours and hours and hours of editing and hearing the stuff over and over again, I would call them going, I don't know what we're doing. Why are we doing this? This is awful. It's horrible. And they would all watch and go, "No, dude, that was hysterical. That's funny." I mean, okay,
you're like that kid in the back seat who's going, "Is this real life?" Like you've just lost all perspective.
Right.
Right, I'm that way. If I'm writing a speech or writing a book, right, I usually start with, "Oh, it's a great idea," and then before you know it, you get into the process, and then halfway through, you become numb. You lose all objectivity. And
what was I thinking?
This is shit. I'm going to throw this in the trash. Everyone's going to hate this. And then, if you can push through, I don't know if it's true for you. If I can push through, usually on the other side, I start to get that enthusiasm back, in the last 20%, and sometimes it even works out. So.
At this point, I trust my instincts because it's worked long enough, and even if it's not good, it's certainly working. So I don't even give a shit anymore. It's
Yeah,
I mean, I really do.
In that.
I do want to do good stuff. I don't want to phone it in, but I don't really care what I'm thinking anymore when I'm in the midst of the process. I trust the original instinct.
By the way, there is a listener line. If you have a comment or question for Brian, you're welcome to dial in, and I'll get to as many of those as come in, or as many as I have time for. Ray Comfort sent me a fruit basket this last, I think it was December, January, something like that. He sent me a basket of fruit with his appreciation, because I guess he used a clip of mine in one of his atheist movie style documentary. I'll call him a documentary, where he goes out and he finds the most clueless atheists on the planet, people who have never considered why they don't believe in a God. And he gets them on camera, and they're just as, they're blindsided. They don't have any good responses. And then he sort of turns them around, and at the end, it's like, now, don't you agree with me? And they're like, yeah, I do agree with you. And he's like, isn't that amazing? Praise Jesus. And I guess he used a clip from me somewhere in one of his films. Has he ever contacted you, Ray Comfort, to talk about The Way of the Mister?
He has not, but I was waiting in line at Caltech to go see, I think it might have been Richard Dawkins. It was part of a skeptic event here. And he actually handed me, I didn't realize it was him, but he himself handed me his own copy of The Origin of Species with the little introduction he did. And I said, "Oh, thank you." And I didn't know it was him until I did one of those double takes where was that Ray Comfort? I think that was Ray Comfort.
Brian, what is that? Did he write just an introduction to the actual Darwin book, or is it a commentary? Yeah.
No, it's the actual book with his own introduction, which just skews everything as far out of whack as you possibly can. It's
How presumptuous is that? Like, I'm going to grab the most revolutionary book, arguably, in the history of biological science, and I'm going to write a foreword. No one asked for me to do this. I'm going to write a foreword, and then I'm going to present it to the masses. I mean, how presumptuous is that?
I thought I should be doing that with the Bible. I should write just skew it as much as possible. And actually, that's kind of what I do with my shows. Actually, I have one going up this month called "He's Not the Messiah, He's a Very Naughty Boy," which is from Life of Brian, one of my all-time favorite movies. And it's just looking a little bit more at the Jesus character critically and going through all of that. But it is, the hubris is amazing.
I've got 303 on the switchboard. Thanks for calling in. You are on with Brian Dalton. Who's this?
This is Donna. I'm from Aurora, Colorado.
Hi, Donna.
Hi, Donna.
What do you have for us today? What do you think?
I just thought that Brian might find it funny that my mother, who is from Alabama, raised us Mormon, but she was rebelling against the Jehovah's Witness religion when she joined the Mormon Church at age 16.
Yeah. I don't know if that's from the frying pan into the fire or from the fire into the frying pan. Maybe a little of both, just depending on the topic.
Did you escape from anything? I mean, what'd you come out of?
Oh, my mother raised us Mormon until we were until I was about 12.
What changed?
And then she was told by some man in the church that she needed to be working on having more kids, and especially boys, because we didn't have any boys in the family. And she was just sort of like, okay, I'm out of here. So it didn't make her lose her faith, but she definitely didn't want to be Mormon anymore. So we left and kind of wandered around. But I just kind of thought that would be amusing to you as an ex-Mormon, that this was a rebellion against the JWs.
Well, I'm even a little more connected because my dad grew up Catholic, and his family converted to Jehovah's Witnesses after he married my mom, who was Mormon. And then he married my mom to keep peace in the family. He never bought it. And they basically excommunicated him. So I never knew my father's family. I saw my uncle and aunt once at my grandma's funeral. I think I saw my grandma maybe 5 or 6 times over the course of my life from my dad's side. So they're really good at just completely cutting you off. They're better at that than the Mormons are.
Oh, yeah.
You do that.
I still have JW relatives, but they suck at cutting us all off. They're really bad at it.
Well, you know,
which I'm thankful.
Who could cut you off? Who could cast you out? You know.
Yeah.
Plenty have done so.
Well, we love you.
But I'm proud to say that my parents are both, I think they're both secret atheists. My mother, I think, will never stop calling herself religious because she's from Alabama and it's part of the culture. And she doesn't feel Southern without it. So
why don't you tell her that you were on the radio with God today and see how that goes over, okay?
She actually has seen a couple episodes of Mr. Deity and found it pretty funny. Yeah. So I think she's mostly a secret atheist. My dad definitely is. And so we're all kind of, me and sister and nieces are all out and proud and fine. So, you know.
Right. I've only had a couple people cut me off in my life, and usually I've been married to them. So.
Well, thank you for all the funny shows, and thank you, Seth. I'm so mad because I'm going to be in Chicago on the 27th when you're here in my town.
Oh no!
At the Free Thought Conference.
Well,
I'm going to be in Chicago on that day.
One day we will rendezvous, and if I have to do a show live just for you in the lobby, you got it. Okay.
Well, thank you very much. All right. We'll talk to you later. Thank you very much, you guys.
Bye-bye.
You know, it's funny, Brian. I used to think that, I always say it like this, and it just sounds terrible, but I used to think that, you know, Mormons are just these happy, weird people. Like, you know, they're all, like, I had Mormon neighbors in one of my previous homes. They were the best, sweetest, nicest people in the world. They were awesome. And it was only after I sort of got into the layers of the onion that I realized how fucking insidious the Mormon faith really is. So, I mean, you've got the insider perspective. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, it's the amazing thing about it is that it's insidious with a smile. I mean, it really is. When you're in it, you don't really have any clue how insidious it is and how provincial and, insular it is. That, you know, it's because it really occupies your entire life. They're good at keeping you busy and keeping you within the fold.
Are you taking medicine over there, Brian? I heard a ding.
I forgot to silence my watch. Hold on.
No problem, my friend. Go ahead. I know it's a serious topic. Forgive me. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, they keep you. In fact, I'm working on a Way of the Mister for next month because I've been having this debate about with this commenter about whether Mormons are brainwashed or not. And the funny thing is that in his comments right there, you can see the brainwashing, but he just can't see it. He cannot see it. He literally wrote to me something to the effect of, I was talking about thinking for yourself, and he said, well, clearly what happened to you is that you opened the door to Satan when you started thinking for yourself. Well, that's brainwashing. If you're going to make people afraid of thinking for themselves and tell them that's an open door to Satan, where you're going, Mormons don't really have a hell, so I can't say, you're going to burn forever, but, you're going to be in the lesser heaven. You're going to be in the Walmart of heavens instead of the Nordstrom.
You don't get your own planet, do you? That's Scientology.
If you go all the way up, if you reach the top upper echelons of the celestial kingdom, you become a god, and you get to create your own universe and people with people. Which I always, I never thought about when I was there, but I just have to ask Mormons, really, you're going to recreate this mess for more people? Are you freaking kidding me? What I really want to do is watch my own spirit children go down to a place and rape each other and commit genocide. And, I want to see babies die of cancer. And, yay, let's do that.
Jeez.
It's so not thought through at all.
Brian Dalton, when you were a Mormon, were you brainwashed? How old were you?
Yes, I was. I totally was, because I grew up in it. So, at 3 years old, they have you giving talks in church. I mean, it's really kind of brilliant when you think about it. But you start talking and you start spouting and giving your testimony and all that stuff before you even can think through, 5 plus 5. I mean, it's just, they get you young and then they keep you in it, and, you're warned about the others. And so all of my friends growing up, the vast majority of them were Mormon until I had 12, and my mom stopped giving a shit about me, and my dad never did. So I was on my own, and I kind of went my own way after that. But then I got hooked in later, and then became rabid about Mormonism. I thought I'd absolutely discovered the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So I went crazy about it for maybe 5 or 6 years, and then started to slow down, and then finally found my way out after about 10 years.
How's that happen? I mean, just what, you opened a book that wasn't the Book of Mormon, or?
Well, it was just a slow, it's just little teeny bits, which is why I do what I do, because I know there are little teeny bits here that get you thinking, and, they're not going to make you leave today, but that thought will lead to another thought, and that thought leads to another thought, and then pretty soon you're not so afraid to actually look into things, because you're starting to realize things don't add up here, and now I'm more interested in knowing the truth than keeping the comfort going, which I think is the real battle in almost all of religion in terms of getting people to think for themselves and get out of it. It's really a battle over, am I going to give up the comfort?
Yeah, I had to give myself permission to ask those questions, because you don't feel like you're qualified, right? They tell you are not qualified.
Right.
So
yeah.
Jackie in the chat room said something, and I'll just echo her question. She said, have you been to go see the comedy musical, The Book of Mormon, and what are your thoughts?
Of course. I've seen it 3 times. I have a benefactor who's really connected to the ex-Mormon community, and every time he'll bring a group of people out here from all over the country. He's well off to see the Book of Mormon when it's playing here. And they always want Mr. Deity to come along. So I've gotten to see it 3 times for free, which is just the most amazing thing. And every time I see it, I'm just stunned at how good it is. I think I'm not going to enjoy it as much this time. And then I enjoy it even more than I did the last time. It's a masterful piece of work.
Awesome.
Absolutely brilliant.
I want to talk about Prager FU here in just a second, but first back to the switchboard. I've got 316. Thanks for waiting on me. You're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. What's your name?
Hello, this is James Rothcroft of the Forest.
Hey, James, you're on with Brian Dalton. What do you have for us?
Hi, James.
I want to say you guys have been such a huge inspiration for me.
Oh, thank you.
My good friend, Chase, he's a Christian, but he was a huge fan of Christopher Hitchens, even though he didn't discover him until 2014. And I've been trying to smuggle Mr. Deity's video on Christopher Hitchens to him because I found it absolutely hilarious.
Explain that to me. I'm sorry. Did you do some stuff on Hitch, Brian?
I did kind of a memoriam episode where he's coming up to give me hell, and Mr. Deity is absolutely terrified of having to confront Hitch. And of course, at first he's excited because he thinks he's going to be able to recreate Rear Window now that he's got Hitch and Jimmy Stewart and the princess. But then he realizes, oh no, it's that Hitchens. And is there any kind, what does he want? And he basically, Mr. Deity makes a deal with Hitch. He's gonna at least give him something. He's just absolutely
try to give him the boobs.
Yeah, he's terrified of Hitch. So who wouldn't be?
Well, I mean, good luck with your buddy. I know that it's not easy, but I think Brian's material and material like it's often it's kind of a gateway. Forgive the word, Brian.
No. I use it myself. You're right.
Okay, good. Because I mean, you're accessible, and I think humor's attractive to people. And I know that, like, if you weren't doing Christianity, let's say you're going after Mormonism, etc. I mean, people in one faith love to laugh at other faiths, right? So
right, of course.
That's a foot in the door. So
the truth is, they don't mind laughing at their own. When I started doing this, I had been with enough religious people, moderate religious people, throughout my years as a religious person, that I knew if you did it well and you didn't cross certain lines, they'd laugh at it too, and they did. I mean, when I was doing this early on, I would say 40% of my email I got was from believers who said, I don't necessarily agree with your point of view, but I like that it's about something that I know about, and it makes me laugh, and it's very funny. So it's hard to be pissed at something that you're laughing at, and laughing is involuntary. So it's you make people laugh. So it gets in there, whether you want it to or not.
Well, best of luck with the project, my friend, and I hope all the pieces come together for you.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I wish you guys well.
All right, take it easy.
Thanks.
So Dennis Prager is conservative evangelical radio host and pundit, and he is the founder of Prager U, or Prager University.
Yeah.
I find great utility in Prager U in the sense that it provides me a case study in how to argue about your faith in the most wrong way humanly possible. Every time I see them attack any one of these arguments, whether it be about science or ethics and morality or purpose or any of these other things, I love the fact that they're experts on atheists and what we think. Every time they jump into those waters, they just get it wrong, and I find myself shaking my head. So from that platform, let me ask you about Prager FU.
Yeah, I started doing Prager FU, which, by the way, I always find it funny. Some people get mad at me saying, you had to get vulgar with it, but they're not really thinking that if it were Prager fuck you, it would be FY instead of FU. I like that it sounds like FU, but originally my thinking was fake university, or, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I came to understand. Yeah, people don't know this, but I used to work with and for Dennis Prager back in the late 80s and early 90s, and we were very good friends. We played racquetball together probably 2 or 3 times a week. I was over to his house for Shabbat dinners all the time. And I had an office that was actually part of his office. He paid my rent, and I produced his newsletter. And then I did my own stuff for other people. I was doing graphic design at the time. And we worked together for years, and we were good friends until 2007, when he did something which I can't talk about, but it was just outrageous to someone that I knew and loved, and he was the schmuck of the world, and I was not going to have anything to do with him after that point.
So I got to play devil's advocate, right? I mean, come on, Brian, this is personal. You're just trying to screw the guy who screwed your friend, kind of thing, I mean, metaphorically speaking, right?
This is the irony is that he was really breaking one of his own he loves the 10 Commandments. And there's one of the big 10 in there that he really tolerated from a mutual friend. And really hurt another mutual friend because of it. And then he just gave this person sucker. And
that didn't mean to push you down a road you don't want to go down. But
that's all I.
But I mean, I think one of those things. One of the obvious responses would be, well, it's personal. That's why you're doing Prager FU. But you were going after really the arguments in the theology, right?
In terms of the videos, I never bring up the personal stuff, or even that I don't even mention. I don't think that I've ever worked with him or that we were good friends. It's basically just taking the videos almost line by line and finding the stupid.
In our next few videos, we're going to be taking a look at the Prager U video, Where Do Good and Evil Come From? I'm going to say Amazon, and I'm told there's free 2-day shipping if you're a Prime member. That sounds amazing. But let's see what our Prager U professor Peter Crafe says. That took me 3 takes.
I'm going to argue for the existence of God from the premise that moral good and evil really exist.
So Pete is going to use moral good and evil, the existence of which cannot be demonstrated, to argue for the existence of God, whose existence cannot be demonstrated. Okay, I'm going to argue for the existence of sock demons, from the premise that Bigfoot exists. This guy's a professor somewhere? Pete, did you get your degree at my alma mater, Prager U? Go Devils! You know they're not accredited, right? He should have gone to Trump U. At least he could have gotten a good steak out of it. I don't know about good, but...
It's amazing. I have one coming up this month where they had a guy, I don't even know how you do this stuff with a straight face. They had a guy, basically the title of it is something like the book that you should read to your kids. And it's the Bible. And, there's no easier, I mean, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. I can go line by line on this one. And it's probably one of the funniest things, at least part 1 is. It's going to be, probably 4 or 5 parts. There's just so much to it. It's ridiculous. But part 1 is, I think it's pretty freaking hysterical.
Well, what are some of the subjects that Prager takes? I've mentioned a few, the morality argument and evolution, et cetera. I mean, but you've seen it more than I have.
Yeah, I've done ones on the afterlife. I think I had a 4 or 5 part series on a video called... it was something about the afterlife.
We live in a world which is absolutely identical in every way imaginable to a world not created by a good and just God. But instead of simply accepting these facts and the conclusion they warrant, the religious, for purposes which Dennis admits are entirely emotional, imagine an unknown realm where these undeniable facts are remedied in some future world of which we have no evidence or knowledge. This is literally the definition of wishful thinking, going from what we know to what we don't in order to relieve us of what we know. And the reason is clear. Prager spends the last minute and a half of this video pointing out how awful life would be if there were no good and just God and no afterlife to remedy the world of immeasurable injustice and suffering this good and just God created for us. Dennis even confesses that his belief in God and the afterlife is the psychopharmatheological remedy he must take in order to maintain his sanity.
There's another series that they did with a scientist talking about how, atheists are every bit as faith, motivated because of the multiverse. The multiverse is just pure faith as a believer, and it's just silly. And he was so disingenuous about science and scientists and how. We don't believe things the way you believe a religious tenet. It's a provisional thing, and you're thinking, well, that sounds good for now, but I'm not going to believe it or give my provisional assent until the science is in. And everyone knows that the science isn't in on the multiverse or whatever. So it was disingenuous, but they've done meaning and suffering and theodicy and all of that kind of stuff. So I just go through and I generally pick out the religious ones, mostly because people seem to hate it. I started a political show during the 2016 campaign because I felt I had to say something. and it's called Mr. D Goes to Washington. And people are not fond of hearing my political views. So I generally I still do that for my patrons. A lot of times I don't even release the video on YouTube because so many people are annoyed by my political views, which is strange because I really did think we were a little bit more coalescing, on politics, free thinkers and atheists and skeptics, and we're really not. It is like herding cats. It's absolutely like herding cats. We're just all over the place on every other topic. We all agree that this God thing is bullshit, but after that, it's every man for himself. So
it's hard too, I think, because there's such a bleed over with religion and politics. In many ways, it's impossible not to, if we're going to be true to humanist values and to speak against the pseudoscience, the anti-science, the assault on human rights, etc. I mean, you've got to address the elephant in the room, the big orange elephant in the room. And you see, I mean, I would say most of the people on my page they're progressives in the way that they have liberal values. But, it's almost impossible to mention a political opinion without watching the seas part. And then before you know it, people are throwing grenades at each other. Right.
It's interesting because, my politics are absolutely informed by my humanism, which came via my atheism. And I don't understand when there's one party who is clearly anti-science, how that's not, a big factor in people's thinking. But, it's another area where, people have, I think there are a few key insights, which if you have them, they almost compel you into the point of view that I have. One of them is that the role of luck in life. I believe that luck is the guiding force of the universe. When I started doing Mr. Deity, this is not the pendant I used to wear because it broke, but I had a pendant that said luck in English and Chinese on that I wore all the time. And in episode 2 of season 2, I think Mr. Deity says luck is the guiding force of the universe. And I truly, truly believe that. And once you do believe that and you realize how deep that goes, and I have a dear friend who teaches cognitive science down here at Cal State Long Beach. And she says there's really only one piece of luck that matters, and that is, are you born with the wherewithal to handle whatever is going to come at you in life? And that's really it. It's one thing, and it's largely in things that you have no control over. Your genes, your parents, your economic situation. That we're just born into this mess of possibility and probability and want and need and all of these things that are going to determine the person that you become and how you're going to handle life and what comes at you. And none of it is under your control. And I think once people understand that and how the mind really works, I mean, cognitive science is huge for me. I want to push David Eagleman's Incognito as much as I can. I think that book is a masterpiece of it's a great little primer of neuroscience. It's 3 or maybe 6 years old now, but it's still amazing. But once you understand how we're not in charge of who we are like we think we are, and to the extent that we think we are, we're not looking at all the stuff that's gone on before that's rewired your brain or the wiring that was there initially that makes you the person that you are.
I'm not going to get into I'm not going to ask you about free will because that's another hour. I'm not doing it.
Yeah, no.
But I have to be pedantic for just a second. Because I know there are going to be some people in the comment sections who got hung up on the word luck. You're not talking like an agency like Lady Luck, like luck was in your favor. You're talking about chance and those types of things.
Yes, it's the basic, situations. People talk about, well, if you make the right choices, and work hard. Those are my two favorites. If you make the right choices and work hard, well, some people don't have any choices. They have no choices. And some people, no matter how hard they work, it's not going to pay off for them. I mean, this is the extreme example, but if you were a slave in 19th century America, it didn't matter how hard you worked or what choices you made. You're just fucked. So you have to realize that still happens, not in such an obvious way, But there are things that we either have or have acquired or haven't acquired that, you know, it's all the difference in the world in terms of how things happen to us. And on other extremes, you know, we know of things like where normal people start getting into kiddie porn, and then they get arrested and they go to jail, and they have some medical condition where they find out that there's a tumor in their brain, and then they take the tumor out and they're no longer interested in kiddie porn. I mean, there's so many things that we don't understand right now. And my focus is in just trying to, you know, I think we spend a lot of money politically curing things instead of preventing them. And I think that's one of my big things politically is let's just prevent this crap from, you know, but then you have to make an investment. You have to make an upfront investment. And people don't like to make the upfront investment. They'd rather, you know, see if everything goes to shit. And if it goes to shit, we'll fix it later. You know,
I call it swatting at the symptoms, right? I mean, they want to put out the immediate threat, but if the root problem remains unaddressed, and yet in the Twitterverse, I mean, you cannot address things like this in 280 characters. It's just impossible. That's right. And yet people want to be spoon-fed the easy answer, the binary answer, the A, B, yes, no, black, white, good, evil answer that will clean up the world. And the world is a messy, messy place. So that's tough. I don't know why I felt the need to tack something onto your answer there. I was just like, you got me riled up. I was like, yes, preach on, Brian. Let's end philosophical, man. Let's talk about you and your life. You doing all right? You got any optimism about the years ahead? Because it is messy out there. What do you think?
It's interesting. I haven't really talked about this on my shows or anything, but I found out this year that I have something called sensory processing sensitivity, which makes me a quote unquote highly sensitive person, which my daughter, it's a genetic thing, and it's my daughter told me years ago that she was a highly sensitive person, and I said, oh yeah, I'm a highly sensitive person too, not realizing that's an actual thing. And finally, my doctor and both my doctor and my therapist said, yeah, you're a highly, you know, you do a little self-test, which has been peer reviewed and everything, and you find out, oh my God, I mean, I'm learning stuff about myself now at 54 that's just kind of freaking me out still. I'm still having to look back and see how this thing has really affected my life. But we literally have 20% of us literally have a different nervous system, and it affects our emotions and literally like our feelings, how we touch and taste and see and smell, and all kinds of weird things that really, now looking back on my life, it all makes sense. I just thought I was a really weird person, and I guess I am. I'm very different from 80% of the population in many ways, but it makes sense now, and it's kind of empowered me. So I've written a script. I want to get back into movie making, and I have a number of scripts that I would really like to make, but there's no way I can make them without a lot of money. So I wrote a script that we can make on our own, and we're hopefully going to start shooting that this year with Jesse Jesus, the guy who plays Jesse Jesus in our show, Sean Douglas, and Scott Clifton, who, if you're YouTube people, you may know him as Theoretical Bullshit. He was in a video I made called The Born Again Identity, and he was amazing. Amy, who plays Lucifer on the show, I think she's going to be in it, and my stepdaughter, who's crazy talented. And it's a small little film that I wrote specifically so that we can make it with a very little budget. We're going to try to crowdsource it and see how that goes. But we can make it out for almost nothing. And it's, you know, Scott read it the other week and wrote me back, you know, dude, this is brilliant, and he loves it. And so I take great pride in that, because he's just such a sharp guy. He's so smart. And such a great actor. I
refuse to be on I try not to be photographed too close to him, because he looks like he was chiseled out of marble.
Well, I have to stand next to Sean Douglas when we do our episodes. It's just infuriating.
Luck was not on my side. I'm just saying. Yeah, I look like Bob Saget. You know what I'm saying, Brian?
You do look a little like Bob Saget.
Oh God, no! Don't say it. How do people find your work? I know that you got your finger in a lot of pies, but is there a hub, a website? Where do people go?
Well, on YouTube, it's Mr Deity, MisterDeity, and the only other place I would encourage people to go is to my Patreon account, which is patreon.com, Mr Deity, capital MrDeity. So that's how you can see my stuff and reach me. And I keep everything free. That's why I love my patrons. I don't want to make it a pay thing. I don't want to put a paywall up. I like people to have the resources of the shows. So thank you to all the patrons who continue to make this possible.
Yeah. Well, dude, it's an honor to be able to have you on the show. You make us laugh and you make us think. Brian Dalton, hope our paths cross again soon. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you so much.